let's talk about note values. So far, you know about note heads when they're placed on a staff, whether it's a line note or a space note, and specifically which one in which clef reads with a specific pitch, correct? Which letter name it is. However, notes should also tell you how long you should hold each of those notes for, because not all notes are equally the same length. So we're going to learn note values. First one we're going to learn is the one that just has a note head, like this. So that already is telling you to hold it for a certain amount of beats. This is called a whole note. And traditionally, it gets 4 beats. Now, let's talk about beats for a second. What a beat is it's a steady underlying pulse. So, has to be steady. So, depending on how fast your beats are, your whole notes will be ta, 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 etc. Of course, you could go faster beats. Ta, 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 etc. But however fast the beats are, it takes up 4 of them. Okay, so that's called a whole note. Next, if you have a note head, I don't know why that one's smaller, and then you add a stem. So that part, the anatomy of a note, that is called a stem. So when you add a stem to a note head, that becomes a half note. And that it becomes twice as fast. So these are only worth 2 beats. So ta, 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 ta. Whole notes are ta, ta. All right. And then if we go again, so what you're going to start finding out is all the existing note values that we use in music. They're always going to be, if we go from the longest to the shortest in order, it's always going to become half the amount of the previous one above it. So now, if the half note gets 2 beats, the next note value we're going to use is half of 2, which is only 1 beat. And it looks like a half note, except the note head is colored in, okay, filled in. This becomes a quarter note. Now notice, especially with the half and the quarter, they're also names of fractions, right? Half is 1/2, quarter is 1/4, but please just memorize it and write the names of it as actual words, because it will get confusing, because if you think 1/4 note, it gets 1 beat, then how does that even work, right? 1/4 equals 1. It gets too confusing. So much like the coin quarter, you never think of it as 1/4 coin, right? A quarter coin. It's 25 cents. It just happens to be called a quarter. And of course it makes sense because 25 cents is quarter of a dollar. But we just think of it as the whole name, quarter note, because that gets 1 beat. So if I do, this will be ta, 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 ta. Make sense? Okay, and because this is a very quick semester, everything is much more jammed in together, I might as well teach you the next note value. Normally I stop here at this point, very beginning of the semester, but we got to keep moving. So you might as well do the next one. So it looks like a quarter, except it has a flag. So that part of it, so please know that arrow isn't part of the note, right? I'm just trying to show you the names of different parts of the note head. That is called a flag. And this, again, becomes half the value of the previous note. So if a quarter note is 1 beat, the next note value, can you guess what the name of it's going to be? Yeah, 8th note. and that's going to only be worth half a beat. So let me stop here for 1 second. So the eighth note, if I just have one of them, that's only worth half a beat. So very often, more often than not, you're going to see them in pairs, because if I have two halves, it becomes one whole beat, right? And we always want to deal with whole number beats instead of fractions of beats left over. We always want to end up with a whole number. Okay, so the flag, when you actually join two together, let me show you what happens. Instead of having two separate flags, the flag turns into a beam. So, eighth notes could either have a flag when they're single, or as pairs, they join up, the flags join up. So think of it like you're arm in arm with your pal, and when you're by yourself, your arm just dangles. So these are the same thing. So these are two separate notes. Even though they're joined together here, it's just will change the rhythm from two quarter notes. So these are two separate notes. So let me show you this one. Let me start with a quarter note. These are your beats. Ta, 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 ta. Ta, ga, ta, ga, ta, ga, ta, ga. Just add in a ka between your tas. Like we're saying the tas on the beats, right? Ta, 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 ta. Ta-ka, 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 ta-ka. Just make sure when you say your taka that they're equal. You don't want to go taka, 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 because this one's shorter and this one has more gap, right? Or ta, ka, ta, ka, ta, ka. They have to be even because they're each worth half a beat. So that's the only thing you have to be careful of. So these are the ones that we need to make sure that you know. You have to know the names of them. Whole note, 4 beats. Half note, 2 beats, quarter note, 1 beat, and eighth note, whether if you see it by itself, it'll have a flag. If you see them together like this, they'll be joined instead of a flag with a beam. They're all the same note value, eighth notes. Okay, we've got to talk a little bit more about how that works on the staff. Okay, I'm not even going to worry about a clef right now. I want to talk about the notes with a stem. So, I want to draw a half note. I'll just do it here and I'll do it here. So, this is what a half note on this placement of the staff will look like. And here, this is what the half note will look like if it's up here, higher up on the staff. So, notice that sometimes the stem goes up, and if it goes up, it's always on the right side of the note head. So, think of the word upright. Right? If it goes up, it's on the right. And then if you imagine that that half note gets flipped, turned upside down, that's what it would look like, right? So on the left, so think low, lower, left. LL, lower left. Okay? If it's on the left side, it will go down. Now, how do you know when to have an up stem or when to have a down stem? If you take a look at this middle line right here, that's the center of the staff. If your note head is below the middle line, your stem must, basically all the time, your stem must cross the middle line. So if the note head is lower and you put your stem down here, nothing will ever cross that middle line. So if it's below, you want to balance it out and do the stem up. Conversely, here's your middle line. If your note head is higher, you want to cross that middle line and balance it out so you have your down stem. Now, the question is, what happens if your note head is right on that middle line? This is considered a down stem. Who knows who decided that, but that is a down stem. So, if I do all notes, I'll just start from here. And I want to add stems to them, right? Then these, okay, so up to this point, the note heads are lower than the middle line, so you got to balance it out and do this. Another question you might ask is how do you know how long to draw your stems? This one's not quite on the right, is it? There we go. Typically, your stem should be 1 octave long. So that means if this were treble clef, this would be a G, right? G of G clef, you wrap around the G line. The next G, one octave higher, well, let's actually do it. Remember, as long as you know how to read one line or one space, what note, what letter name designation the clef would have, you can, of course it takes longer, but you could figure out all the other lines and spaces, what note they're going to stand for, right? Because if this is G, that's all you need to know. It's going to be tedious, but you just start counting, and if you go up, you're going to go forward in the alphabet. And you must alternate. If you go every letter name without skipping any, you're always going to alternate from a line note to a space note to a line note to a space note to a line note, etc. So let's just say the alphabet as we start skipping line, space, line, space. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. G would be basically here, right on the space outside of the staff, right? So I have already planned it. My stem is smack in where in the middle of that note head. And then A would be where the ledger line would happen, right? So I've stopped right there, etc. Okay, so middle line. Do you remember which way the middle line one goes? See this one? It is a down. So everything from the middle line on up, the stems must go the opposite direction and go down. Now, if this is actually a B, right below high C in treble clef. So I'm thinking middle C would have been right there, and I go just a little past. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it just looks better because you don't really want half notes with a tiny short stem, a little tiny stick, or a really long one. It just looks a little ridiculous. So might as well learn it correctly. Okay, so this will apply to all of these notes. Any note that has a stem will apply. So whether I color it in, right, that's what it would look like. That's a quarter note. So the stem direction will apply to any of the notes that have stems, which are all of these, right, except for a whole note. Half note has a stem, quarter note has a stem, eighth notes have stems. Now, let's talk about flags. Okay, so let's do these two. These two right now, they're currently quarter notes. I want to change them to eighth notes, single eighth notes. So this is what happens. Let me start with the up stem first, because as you see, the stem stays on the right side. Okay? Now, what's weird is, if you just take the stem, right, of an up stem, and then flip it upside down, then the stem will end up on the left side, right? Well, that is the only thing when you're drawing notes, the only thing that could switch from the right side of the note head to the left side of the note head is the stem itself. Any other thing that if you have a question, should I put it on the right or left? It will always be on the right. So this is the confusing part. When you do your flag actually has to stay on the right side. So notice on this side, up stem, the flag is on the opposite side of the stem as the note head, right? Either side. But on a down stem, your flag is on the same side as your note head. I know, weird rules. Who decided these? Certainly not me, but that's just the way it's going to be. Okay, and then if you have eighth notes together with beams, then that's easy. You just go like this. Just imagine that isn't there, and then you would just join it like this. Here's the other thing also with music. When you're writing music down, the longer notes should have more space in between them. So for example, if I have this, and then, well, let's make it a half note. And then I'll do this, and then this, and then I'll draw a bar line, and then I am leaving that deliberately. Okay, say we have this. We don't really have to get into this much detail in this beginning piano class, but say I want to make these two eighth notes with beams. Okay, so if you just take this note alone, remember, which way does the stem go? If it's above the middle line, it's in this placement, isn't it? Then the stem would go down. Now this one is like this one, right? The stem would go up. When you are trying to connect two eighth notes with beams, you cannot have the stems go in opposite direction, because then you get this weird looking thing that looks like this, right? That looks ridiculous. So they have to go in the same direction. So if one is a down stem and one is an up stem, there is sort of a system. Basically, take the middle line. You guys ever play tug of war? Picture the tug of war. There is a center line, right? And then the two teams are on either side, and you are pulling. And whichever team, whoever is farther away from the middle line wins, correct? Because they are tugging away. Same kind of thing. There's your middle line. Which note is further away? That's going to win. This note, isn't it? That's further away, so that will win. That's an up stem, so this ends up having to switch to an up stem. So that's what it would look like. So notice what I did here. If you have a 2-beat note, I've actually left sort of a gap right here, right? So it takes a longer space, and then 2 quarter notes, 1 beat each, so they're closer together. And then I have eighth notes, which are even faster, so they're even closer together. They're not quite, exactly the same, the correct proportions, right? But you get what I mean? The closer notes, the faster notes should be closer together. This one I didn't do such a good job. This should have been a little bit further away, or these should have been a little bit closer. But you get the idea. The faster note values should be more clustered together because they happen faster. So if you kind of imagine like your beats are kind of evenly spaced, right? So you don't want one beat to suddenly be this big a gap between the first and second beat, right? They should sort of be evenly spaced out. And so your notes should sort of reflect that. Longer notes should have a bigger back gap because there's more beats to hold it through. All right, I think that's it. And actually, no, we might as well learned all of it. Okay, so this sort of limits, if this is all we have, of course, there are other note values which you don't need to know in this semester. If we go past it, we will get into 16th notes. And that'll be twice as fast as these. So 16th notes, basically anything from 8th notes on, you are just going to add more flags or more beams. So a 16th note would look like this if you had single ones. 2 flags, which of course if the stem were up, it would look like this. And then typically 16th notes, you often see them in groups of 4 because they're twice as fast as 8th notes, and you'll have 2 beams like this. So each one is worth a quarter of a beat. So you typically will have 4 together. So you can see as a group that is your complete 1 beat. Yeah? Anyways, and then you get twice as fast as that. You just add a 3rd beam or a 3rd flag, etc. But these are really the main ones you need to know. But if you just even look at these, what's missing? You got a 1-beat note, you got a 2-beat note, you don't have a 3-beat note. Well, you could certainly have a 3-beat note. So any of these note values, you can add a dot to them. So this is what happens. Let's put it over here. So I have a whole note, and remember, anything you add to the note, if you're asking right or left, it's always going to be on the right, except for the stem itself. When it's an up stem, it's on the right. When it's a down stem, it goes on the left. But the dot will always, regardless, look, if your stem is going down or your stem is going up. Your dots will always remain on the right side. What does a dot do? This is called a dotted whole note. So all you add is dotted in front of whatever note value. A dot adds half the value of the preceding note. So whatever the note value it's attached to, if you just take that alone, that has 4 beats, right? And then you're adding, the dot is you're adding half that. What is half of 4? 2 beats. So that would equal a 6-beat note. Take a look. I'll just do it this way just for a change with the down stem. This is called dotted half note, right? So what does a half note equal? How many beats? 2 beats, right? The half note itself. And then you're going to add half of that. What is half of 2? That is 1. So this is where you get your 3-beat note. Dotted half note. So that would go here. These ones, though, I'm just giving you the general, the specific note value, right? Well, let's just continue. I'll do this one up. How many beats is this? This is called a dotted quarter note. So notice whether the stem is down or the stem is up, the dot is always on the right. Dotted quarter note. Quarter note itself gets 1 beat, and then you have to add half of that. What's half of 1? Just a half, right? So that is worth 1.5 beats, or 1.5 beats. And it continues. Well, let's do the last one since we're doing all of those anyways. Dotted eighth note. Now we're really getting into just adding fractions. Remember having fun with those, whatever grade that was? How many beats does an eighth note get? So this is especially where it gets confusing, because eighth note, you always want to think eighth note, right? But don't think it. Think of it as the name, eighth note, because that gets half a beat. Half a beat. So it's half a beat, and that adds half of that. What is half of a half? Remember, picture your pie. You break it into a half, and then you cut that half into another half. So that's your result. Just a quarter, right? And then remember, having to add fractions with different denominators. You're going to change this so you have a common denominator, 2/4 plus 1/4. That is 3/4 of a beat, or 0.75 of a beat. So that's how it works. It's pretty complex, and I know it seems like it's overwhelming, but this is it. This is all the kind of note values that we use in music all the time. So eventually, when you have played and read music for a long time, these just become second nature. Okay? So for you guys, this is the important one. Actually, at the end of this week, on Thursday, and even Wednesday, we might start talking about it, you do need to know your eighth notes, which are more commonly used with beams. Okay? Whole note, 4 beats. Half note, 2 beats. Quarter note, 1 beat. Eighth note, half a beat. Actually, I want to talk about one more thing with note values. You can actually also do other ones, because if you just add a dot, you could change the value of the single note by adding half, but that's just limiting. What if I want other kinds of values that don't quite add up when you use dots? So that's an E, not a C. That's a tie. Ties. A tie is you're going to see it as a curved line. So if I do this, so it kind of looks like a smile, doesn't it? That is a tie. So know the difference. If I have this, I'll do it here. That is a tie. However, in music, there's another one that looks the same. It's a curved line. That is called, that is called a slur. So what's the difference between a tie and a slur? Because they look the same. So a tie can only join 2 of the exact same pitches, exact same note, whereas a slur will change to a different note. It doesn't have to be right next to it. It could be a leap up. It has to just move to a different note. And all the slur would mean is to make sure that you play, and I'll talk about this also more, I guess, on the second day, legato. To play legato, which means to play smooth and connected. So instead of da, da, it'll go ta. You would join it without having any silence in between. You would just make it smooth and connected. So this one, instead of going da, da. And hearing this one again, what a tie does is it combines the values of both notes into one supernote. So basically, you're adding this value to this note. So my teacher used to always do this for me. Just cross out. You're actually not playing it. So instead of holding it for 2 beats and then playing it again for 1 beat, you actually will play it for the single note for 3 beats. Which I know you can use it like this, right? You can write it like this. We'll talk about the differences later. Okay? But what if you have this? This makes sense, right? Why you need a tie. Because this will be a 2-beat note. And this is a dotted half note, which is a 3-beat note. And that would combine into a single note that is 5 beats long. And there's no other way to write a 5-beat long note other than doing it like this, drawing 2 separate notes and adding a tie to them so that you add up the total of both values and play it as a single note. Okay, now I think I'm done there. Let's actually just practice doing some rhythms so you understand how this works. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I'm just going to do this for you. I'll talk about this the next day. This is called a time signature. Don't even worry about it, but this is sort of the number that you're going to pay attention to for now. So I'm going to draw a bunch of notes and we're going to perform them. We're not going to play, we're just going to say ta on the notes. Okay. So now you're going to start to see how this works, rhythms work in music. So whenever at the beginning, you will have something called a time signature at the beginning of the piece. Actually, I might as well talk about piece for a second. When we say piece, it's in lieu of the word song. So as pianists, we don't play songs. Songs are something that you would sing. It's a musical work that is sung. A piece is a musical work that is played. So that's what instrumentalists will perform. I know it's kind of confusing because a piece could also, it implies a portion of something, right? But this is not used in that way. That's an actual entire musical work. So all pieces should start with a time signature. It tells you ahead of time what does this for, what do you see has to do with this music you see. Take a look, not how many notes you see. Now remember, this is called a bar line. I've made so many videos so far, I don't remember when I mentioned what, so I may not have talked about this yet. That's a bar line again. So these are all bar lines. The last one you see, that bar line always becomes double. So it's called a double bar line, double bar, we'll just call it. The second line is typically fatter than the first one, and that just signifies you're done. If you only had a single bar here, okay, you would expect to go to the next line and the music will continue. Just like when you read a novel, you don't just have one line, right? It just keeps going and you just have to keep moving. But that tells you you're done and you stop. So, not how, okay, and the other thing I wanted to talk about is what is in between the bar lines. Those are called measures. So we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 measures. Okay, so notice what is inside each measure. What do they have in common? This, 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 and this. They all add up to 4 beats, don't they? If these are 1 beat, there's 4 of them, that's 4 beats. That's a 2-beat note, and 1 and 1. 2 plus 1 plus 1, that's 4. Dotted half note, do you remember how many beats that gets? 2 beats plus half of 2 is 1. 3 beats plus 1 beat, that's 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that alone is 4 beats. So you're always going to have that. So the bar lines are not just randomly placed. It will be specifically placed after a certain number of beats gets used up, and then you start a new measure. So this means that you will get 4 beats per measure. Didn't I just promise I'm not going to talk about time signature? Well, I just did. So that's all that means. It's just hard to perform this rhythm without explaining the whole layout. Okay, so this is how it's going to sound. Ta, 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 ta. Did you kind of understand that? Okay, so remember, quarter notes, we just, whatever the speed of the beats are, you're just going ta, 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 ta. You just say a ta on every one of these beats, right? Ta, ta. When you have half notes, you got to hold it for an extra beat. So it becomes ta, 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 because you got to hold it for 2 beats. They're 2 beats long. This 3 beats, so 3 beats, every 3 beats. Ta, ta, ta. And then the 4 beats, this is 4 beats. You gotta wait. Ta, ta, ta. Right? 4 beats. So that's all it is. Can you do this with me from the beginning? 1, 2, ready, and ta, 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 ta. Cool. Let's do another one. So exciting. Ooh, let's break it up like this. This is actually easier, right? Less notes. Okay, so again, if you look at this, all of it, there, it adds up to 4 beats per measure. 2 plus 2 is 4. 1 plus 2 plus 1, 1, 2, 1, 4 beats. 3 plus 1, 4 beats, and that alone is 4 beats. Do you remember the names of them? These are what kind of notes? Half notes, quarter note, half note, quarter note, dotted half note, quarter note, whole note. Beats, 2 beats, 2 beats, 1 beat, 2 beats, 1 beat, 3 beats, 1 and 4 beats. Let's try it. And ready, and ta, 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 ta. Again, ready, and ta, 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 ta. Okay, now, since I already talked about the top number, I might as well finish and talk about the bottom number. Bottom number is a lot, sort of a source of confusion for a lot of students. So, the top number, you will see different time signatures. They could look like this, it could look like this, or it could look like this. These are the typical ones when you have a 4 at the bottom. So this means you'll only have 2 beats per measure. So after 2 beats, you have a bar line. 2 beats, bar line. This, you'll have 3 beats per measure. 1, 2, 3, bar line. 1, 2, 3, bar line. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And this one, like these, every 4 beats. Top number, that's always what's going to tell you how many beats per measure you're going to find. This is a constant. This represents one of these note values. The bottom number of every time signature represents a note value. So what note value do you think the 4 at the bottom stands for? Whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note. Anyone have a guess? Quarter note. Because even though I said don't think of a quarter note as a fraction, if you did write it as a fraction, it would be this, and you got your 4 at the bottom. So what this is telling you is quarter note, that's what the 4 stands for, the bottom 4. Quarter note gets 1 beat. And you're like, well, duh. Well, we're starting you nice and easy, but for some reason, musicians from a long time ago decide, hey, we don't have to keep that constant. Maybe this gets 1 beat. Maybe this gets 1 beat. And it could change. What doesn't change, because I don't want you to freak out, is the relationship of this value to this value to this value to this value. This, you need 2 half notes to equal 1 whole note, right? This is half the value of this, right? So if this gets 1 beat suddenly, this is twice as long. So that would get 2 beats. So everything just changes, but the ratio from one note value to the next never changes. So if you start from the fastest note value, if you slow it down 2 times by 2, it'll get to this, right? And then this, if you slow it down, it'll go to here. If you slow it down by 2. Conversely, if you go this way, if you go twice as fast, it becomes this. Twice as fast, it becomes this. So always if you're going this way, you're halving the value, half the value. So if this is 4, half of it, that's 2 beats. Half of that is 1 beat. Half of 1 is a half beat, right? And if you go this way, you're multiplying it by 2. Say, for example, in a time signature, now they're telling you that's 1 beat. Don't freak out. That's 1 beat. You multiply by 2. That's 2 beats. That's 4 beats. And that's 8 beats. So that'll never change. But we're just going to keep it simple. Just know that the quarter note. So if you have 4 beats, those 4 beats are the equivalent of quarter notes, right? If you have 3/4, then you're going to have 3 beats per measure, and each of those beats are the quarter note value. Okay, very good. So I was planning to make 2 separate videos, one for just the note names and then talking about measures and time signatures, but I did it all in one. Woohoo!